All right, so this is the first episode of the whatever we're gonna call this show, Charlie and Todd show. We never know, but
Episode.
episode one.
I like that word.
What
Episode.
episode?
It's a good word.
The beginning of something.
Beginning.
It's always a beginning.
So what's on your mind? What do you want to talk about today?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I was having this talk with Pastor Jeff at our church. We go to Wellspring, and we were having this talk about yoga,
Okay.
and I asked him like, "What's your perspective and your opinion on yoga?" And we were getting into that, but I I talked about how what got me into it was having two knee surgeries,
Mm-hmm.
and I was playing ball in college, and I was doing all the rehab, but it wasn't really working. And what I mean by that is I would be like walking around campus, and my knees would just buckle all the time. And it was the most painful thing, and I was trying to figure out how do I heal my knees, and I saw this video of this guy who worked in the army, and he was in the Air Force, and he used to be like an air jumper, and because of all the jumping out of the planes, he damaged his knees, and he gained all this weight, and he had to walk with like assistance, like with little arm, braces, and so he eventually found this yoga instructor who trained him virtually, and within 11 months lost all the weight, can run and everything. I was like, wow, that's really inspirational. Maybe I can use yoga, right, to help with my knees. And I did it for a month and a half. It was painful, and then after a month and a half, all my knee pain went away. And I was like, yoga's the best thing out there. But what it ended up doing is just opening this door to a lot of philosophies, right, and beliefs, and a lot of, you could say, spiritual gurus that just led me down a path of just confusion for a good 4 or 5 years. So so we were talking about, what are the pros and cons of yoga, and as a Christian, should you be, you know dabbling in that? What are your thoughts?
So there's a lot of thoughts on that. So yoga in itself, I heard on a podcast once somebody talking about it, how it was originally designed to evangelize the West. So if you really think about the origins of it and where it comes from, it is basically Hinduism. Multiple gods, as many gods as you want. But that's really the thing, is it's like it evangelizes by finding a need for somebody for either exercise or community or spirituality or repairing an injury or just finding a hobby. And by doing that, that's kind of the net that they grab by. But once you get in, it seems this is good for you. It's healthy. It's stretching. It's this, that, the other. I'm breathing. I'm sweating. It's all good stuff. Then comes in some weirdo that's chanting or
Yeah.
humming or trying to teach you about life philosophies, and it instantaneously becomes a religion.
Yeah.
And you don't realize you've already joined the Hindu religion, and nobody told you that. You just thought you were stretching. And that transition is typically, because it's like a world and a community that you start to go deeper and deeper into, and then all of a sudden you're in a religion, you don't realize it, and you're 100% certain you're not in a religion.
Yeah.
And that's the deception of it, and it's kind of like a deceptive evangelism.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I remember my first time. First, I went on campus, and it wasn't. It was like a workout class, but then I was home for winter break, and there was a new yoga studio that opened up, and I went there, and as they open the yoga session with a chant. It's just you know, like a certain chant, and everyone does it together. And then they're going through and talking about their different philosophies, and they're weaving it in, and then the instructor is talking about what's going on with them, and they're applying these principles. And and I brought plenty of people, family, friends, like, "Yo, you got to check out yoga." But then again, it started to pour into, okay, let me read some of their books, let me check out some of this, let me check out some of that. And yeah, like you said, it's promoting healthier lifestyle. That's how I saw it at first, but then it speaks to a lot of the pain points and challenges that people are dealing with. People are stressed, and it's solving sometimes an immediate need. I've had some people, that family, that have come with me, and they're like, man, I just feel like I need yoga after they go to the first time because they're super stressed, and it helps them alleviate the stress. And but what I don't think they're recognizing is what the underlying message is. And I remember you sent me some video. It was like a documentary on this one lady. It might have been a few people that went really deep into yoga to the point where they were, it might have been like Kundalini yoga, where they were going, somewhere into a different country and really getting into the, just to the extreme end of it, right? Yoga, like all day, meditating, not eating, but then she just started experiencing some really creepy stuff on a spiritual level, you know? I don't think the average person probably experiences that, but that's, my brain was going to, hey, let me become a yoga instructor, because I was like, this healed my knees. So it can get to that point once you have this immediate, positive experience.
Yeah, and think about that. They basically recruited you, right, through a need. They exploited something you need. They had a solution for you physically. And then they convert that into two things. One, they're introducing a philosophy and a religion to you that you don't realize. And now they're sending you out recruiting friends and family. And now you're pulling other people into a religion and you don't even realize it.
That's the other thing. When you say they, where does the they stem from? Who is the initial mastermind of it? Because a lot of people, like myself, like, I wasn't thinking I was doing any harm to anybody. I thought it was perfectly fine. So who's responsible for it at the end of the day? Who's the mastermind behind this? Right?
I'd say it's pretty simple. It's Satan.
Right.
The concept of know your enemy, and the ministry I do of know your enemy is really understanding how that goes. Satan displays himself as a pitchfork and a red devil with horns, and is going to come to you in a dark alley and be very ugly like an alien and just stab you or kill you, or blood everywhere, murderous. But in actuality, he's a fallen angel that was the single most beautiful angel, and he's a counterfeiter. So what he does is he disguises himself, and he presents as something helpful, something loving, something caring, and he wants to look like God and deceive you slightly, and he's more clever than you are. So the idea of know your enemy is to understand he's more clever than you and to study his techniques and his tactics. And that's what happens, is that disguise, or that counterfeiting, it's made so that you can't tell the difference. It's made so that it feels good. It's a spiritual thing, is what it is. So the they is spirits, whether it be demons, it be Satan, it be his minions, whatever it may be. It's a collection of spiritual movement, as all false religions are, that get you to get involved in it and evangelize it and spread it in certain ways. And most importantly, they like to bleed it into true religion. Because if you were the devil and you had to create a plan, what better plan than to have people doing yoga in church?
Right.
Isn't that interesting? So we're basically now contorting our bodies in snake suggestions in different ways, and opening ourselves up, chanting something we have no idea what we're saying, to the Kundalini snake god of yoga inside of a Christian church. And we thought we were just healing our knees.
Yeah. I never forget. And there's a very real experience that people can have sensationally by doing those types of things. I never forget this one time I did this. It wasn't yoga, but it was, I think, Hindu related. It was some type of like chanting video. And this is back when I was deep into it. I was far off my faith. And I did it, and I had the craziest like burning, buzzing sensation like in my throat. Unnatural. Something I had never experienced before. And so there is a very real spiritual element to that stuff.
Yeah. And if you go back and ask your guru or whoever it is that's in front of the room with all the influence, what's going on, They'll say, "Oh, congratulations! They'll compliment you. You're very advanced. Most people don't get to that as soon as you did.
You
Wow,
opened your throat chakra.
yeah, your chakra. Let me
Yeah.
tell you how special you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, you opened your throat chakra, and that's man. I know people have been teaching this for 20 years, can't even do that, right? And all this nonsense.
And you feel like you're advancing in
Yeah.
some way when you feel that. I felt things in like the center of my chest,
Yeah,
and you think, but it's some illusion. Like, but at the end of the day, what are you really getting?
yeah,
Like I
Yeah.
don't know. Like people that do that, what tangible, evidence do you have that this is working for you?
Well, if you think about it, what it harps on is people have a need for spirituality. They have a need to worship. They have a need for an understanding intellectually. They have an emotional need to feel something, and they have a need belief wise to conclude what life's about. There's all these really deep seated questions that people don't realize they even have, that they're always trying to find and meet.
Yeah.
And they're always seeking that truth, if you will. And when they find something that starts to fill that hole, even though it's only filling it by a smidgen of what truth would fill it with, they cling to it and they start to worship it. And they're worshiping it because they're constantly talking about it.
Yeah.
And they're constantly thinking about it, and they're constantly doing it. And they're trying to get other people to go do it because they want to share that feeling that they had with others. They want to share this revelation because in their life they went from point A to point B, and now they're trying to recreate that for others out of a a loving desire in their heart.
Yeah.
And we're made to do that also. Is we were created by God to share what's in our heart with others and share truth with them. So if we're convinced something's the truth and it's fulfilling our heart, we have a need to go evangelize that and tell other people about it. So it's really that's what the counterfeit false religion is. It's as close to true religion as you can get, but it couldn't be further away. But it's filling all the needs inside of the human being. And that's what the design of the enemy is. And every false religion is, how do I fill the needs of them? How do I make them feel like they're attached to something and on their path to God, if you will? But how do I do it in such a way that it will take them as far away from God as possible and be fully convinced of it?
How do you, when you talk about false religion and you think about all the, I know plenty of people that are of different religions outside of Christianity. And, like you said, to the point, we have these questions in the back of our minds. Sometimes people don't. But one of the ones that at the top of my mind is, well, why is it that some, people that you love, family, friends, they're involved in a different religion and you're in your, as a Christian, and, that question of, why? And that's a tough one. I think, yeah, because great people, loving people, what allowed, God to choose me as a Christian and other people that are known as Christians and not them.
Well, it's one of the biggest struggles and concerns for people. And what it really comes down to is we think the way that we think because the way we were made and because of our sinful nature added to that. And understanding the fall is essential because we originally weren't going in that direction, but from the fall and sin being involved, we then put God on trial. And the real root of the question is, why doesn't God think like me? And some people go as far to say, well, if he's real, why would he do what he does? He should do what I would do if I were God. So the question is, and in the Bible, Paul states it with, what is the clay to say to the potter, why did you make me this way? Right? And it's that idea of like, okay, so he made everything. You struggle to make a gingerbread house that has clear instructions. You know what I mean? But like he created like Jupiter,
Yeah.
and the universe, which we can't even comprehend with our peanut brains, the size of it. But we're then going to put him on trial for why he does what he does. And, biblically, he reveals to us a lot of pieces, but he doesn't reveal everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really where people stumble, is they stumble on this concept of, why does God do what he does? Or God doesn't exist because he does what he does, but simultaneously they're mad at him for doing what he does, which is a conclusion that he does exist. So which one is it? You don't believe in him, you're mad at him, or you're subservient to him and you're going to allow him to be God. And that's really, it comes down to pride.
Mm-hmm.
And men really struggle with this issue because they look at it with their intellect, they look at it with their pride, and they say, they're really not directly saying it, because if it comes out of their mouth, they'll capture it and say that's ridiculous. But they're really saying, the underlying tone is that if I was God, I wouldn't do this. So why does God save some and not save others? Well, that's his business.
Yeah.
And if you were God, you could change it, but you're not.
There's still a sense of curiosity.
Yeah.
Especially when you bring into the fold people that you love and you care about and you pray for. And it's a curiosity.
Right. And if let's go back to the yoga reference, is if you had a family member you loved and you prayed for that had knee issues,
Mm-hmm.
you would probably open your mouth and say, listen, I need you to really hear me. This is really, really important. I know you're struggling with this and I don't want you in pain. I had the same pain. I know exactly where you're coming from. And this worked for me. This resolved my issue completely and totally. This is my testimony. This is my story. This is what changed my life. And it would mean nothing more to me than if you just pursued it a little bit and see if you could get some results from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about evangelism in Christianity, really that's the same formula.
That's true.
If you love somebody enough, you care about them enough eternally, it's like God has left us with this kind of friction where the grace is his, the saving is his, he does the work, and he has the foreknowledge of what it will be in the end, but we don't.
Right.
So we have no idea whether that person is coming to a saving grace later on, and we have no idea whether or not we're supposed to be involved in that. But we do have a desire and a love for them to communicate and share it with them.
That's true.
But then we simultaneously have this programming from the enemy that we're worried about what they'll think if we talk to them about it.
You led to my next question and observation, and this is a big one for me. There's a hesitation and a fear of recommending things, and even to the point where, I guess it didn't happen as much with yoga, but when it comes to Christianity, there's a fear of evangelizing, and I don't know what the reason is. I look at just some people who have this I guess it's built up over time, to have the strength and the conviction to do it. But that's a really good point.
Well, I'll take a stab at it. So my life has been tumultuous, to say the least. There's been a lot of trials, there's been a lot of issues, there's been a lot of problems, and I'm very curious and I'm very I would say ambitious to solve problems. And when I have certain pains, I look to go find the solutions, and I spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of resources, a lot of money to find good answers. And I've learned better how to find answers to things. So as I've gone out and found solutions to things, some things I've found great solutions to that I'm 100% certain is a solution to a problem. Other things I've found solutions that have helped, but not necessarily fully solved. And some things I've found solutions that don't work at all. So I've then gone and communicated a lot of those things to other people, and they're not always welcomed. Some people have things that I know are very basic problems that I know 100% with 100% certainty what solves those problems. But when you go in love and try to share that with them, sometimes they think you're crazy. Sometimes they can't hear you whatsoever because they have existing beliefs that prevent them from hearing you. Because in their mind, they're thinking, well, if it was that easy, my doctor would have told me that. Or if it was that easy, Google would have told me that. Mm-hmm. Or if it was that easy, I would already know it. Or if this is so good and this works so well, then how come nobody else knows about it? So there's beliefs that people have that prevent them from hearing you. And it's not your job to open somebody's ears. You can try to persuade them. You can try to bring truth. You can try to bring information, but you have to have a boundary where your job stops and their job picks up. And when it comes to evangelizing Christianity, it's about timing, and it's about God opening their ears and their mind and their heart, which ties back into timing. And sometimes it's the right time and sometimes it isn't. And that's the concept of planting seeds. Sometimes you plant a seed and they can't really hear it, but maybe 10 years later they hear it. And they think back and they go, oh my gosh, he's been here all along talking to me. Yeah. And then they have their great moment. So that's the thing is, the Bible gives us that analogy of being like that farmer of spreading seeds. And, some will be choked out, right? Some will be snatched up by the birds. The birds get them, right? Some will start to grow and then they'll die off because they're not in good soil. They weren't planted in a good place. And then some will grow great and give you a massive multiplier return. So as the farmer, you just put down the seed. You can't be afraid to put down the seed because it might not grow. Yeah. The birds are definitely going to eat some of them. There's no doubt. Some of them are going to fall in the rocky soil and some are going to grow up and get choked out by weeds. So, and really, if we think about it, anything we evangelize, anything we try to teach somebody or tell somebody that was beneficial to us, some people hear it, some people don't.
Yeah, that's the truth across the board.
But when it comes to Christianity, sometimes we get so worried about it, it puts us into silence, but that's really just the enemy's plan. Yeah. They want you to feel an embarrassment. You shared something with somebody, here was this, really awkward exchange or this really aggressive response that embarrasses you, that prevents you from doing what others. And then it goes back to, I should just mind my business.
Yeah, and I think also, the message of evangelism, especially in the Christian faith, it's not just spreading the gospel, but it's the message of the gospel and what that means and how do you have love and compassion to other people. And I never forget, we were at church and Pastor Jeff was talking about, I forget who, but it was someone who helped the family by giving them something. It was something so simple. It might have been a plant or, food or groceries, and she did it consistently, and she didn't say anything about, her being a Christian, but it was just her act of love and act of kindness that made them curious to say, like, what in the world made you want to do something like that? And it's acts like that can open people's hearts up. But at the same time, to your point about, it's God's timing. So the weight of it doesn't really fall on us. It's ultimately his decision how it's going to happen.
Yeah. And the fruit of the tree is kind of the analogy we're given in Scripture, where if you're rooted properly in Christ, you're a part of the vine. It says that a good tree can only bear good fruit, cannot bear bad fruit, and likewise a bad tree cannot bear good fruit, can only bear bad fruit. And sometimes it's like, okay, well, I got some fruit and I guess somebody ate from it and I didn't even know about it. And they gleaned something that I later found out about that I had no clue of. Then there's people, you try to give them the fruit and they're like, I don't like that fruit, right? And then there's people where you just say, well, I know there's hungry people over here. I'm going to leave some fruit here and maybe somebody will pick it up. Yeah. And then there's times you go back and you check whether somebody took it, and there's times you just leave it and never check again, and maybe it was taken, maybe it wasn't. So it just goes back to what you feel led to do as far as communicating goes, as far as sharing, and really it's God's business, and it's an honor to get used in any capacity whatsoever. And what I've found is most of the time you are used, it's not the way you thought it would happen.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of times it's quite the opposite. You think you screwed something up and it worked. Mm-hmm. And when you think you did everything perfect, it doesn't work. Because God reminds us very often that it's not our effort per se, but it's him doing that work, so that we can't take pride from it and take, honor and as if God needs us for anything.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
I remember, to the point about the seeds and falling on deaf ears, and you pick up certain, some people pick up, it lands in the soil, and in that regard, I remember when I first started, when you kind of, it was like through a process of you introducing me back to the Lord. And it was like a little before I got fired from this job. I was miserable in my job. First, I was loving what I was doing in consulting, but I was all over the place, like spiritually, emotionally. I wasn't content with what I had, which was a great opportunity. So I just like spread myself so thin, and I didn't really have a sense of just making wise decisions. So led me down to getting a job that I didn't like. I hated it. I was miserable. I remember I was talking with you about that. And then during that time, you know, just through our relationship, asking you questions, like we talked a lot about personal development and business, but then I never forget this one time where you were like, "What's the problem with personal development?" I was like, I don't know. Like this was probably like a week or two before I got fired from this job, and you're like, "It's missing, you know, the gospel. It's missing Jesus," and that was really, and that was at a time where I was really into a lot of New Age and Bob Proctor's and Deepak Chopra, all these New Age people, and it was interesting, and it took a good 3 or 4 years, even reading the Bible, to really see the dangers of a lot of those thought leaders, considered thought leaders, right, in the New Age space, and it took like 3 years. I felt like it was like a year ago where I really recognized, man, the route to get what you need is straight in the Bible. Like,
Yeah.
that'll direct you to all the resources where you need, but you don't really need, you don't have to start with anything else besides the Bible. And you've been telling me this for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And it took some time to really get to that point.
Well, it's like an air traffic controller watching a plane circle the airport and telling it how to land, where to land, when to land. Just trust me, you can land. And then somebody just circles for 3 years. And sometimes they run out of gas and just fall off.
Yeah.
Right? But that's really what it is. It's in the timing. And it's funny you mentioned like Chopra and Proctor, and they're tools of the enemy. When you say New Age, it's funny. So like that whole personal development world. I mean, even Joel Osteen, personal development world, Your Best Life Now, and Chopra writes a book, something about the third Christ, and all this nonsense in that book. It's insane. Bob Proctor with talking about the Secret and the Law of Attraction. These are all super false religions, and there's no fruit on those trees, and the people that follow them get no results whatsoever, but they never measure the result. And at the end of the day, these people just leave with your money. They leave with your money. They have you thinking that every time you receive money, it's because you attracted it.
Yeah.
When it's really just the same money everybody else receives, you just perceive it differently.
It's a confirmation bias.
Yeah.
They plant a seed into your mind that you're attracting these things, and everything is showing you that things aren't going well.
Right.
When you look at your life over the course of a month and 2 months, over a year, but then boom, something like real small happens, and you're like, law of attraction.
Yeah. And people that love you are outside looking at you saying, yeah, dude, like, that's not working for you. And you're totally convinced, no. I've got this Messiah figure, Bob Proctor, who told me that if I just stick with it, and if I keep going, and I keep, well, how much did you pay him? Well, the course, I don't want to talk about it. You pay the guy $10,000, and he weans you on for 10 years, takes all your money, and nothing comes to you. What he's really doing is he's dead now, but he's manipulated the reticular activating system of the brain and that concept of it, where when you see something and you focus on it, you tend to see more of it. And he's calling that the law of attraction, but really that's something God created in our brain. And it's really created as a filter so that you don't see everything all the time. Your brain would explode if you saw everything all the time. You can only see what you're focusing on. And people always see that when they get the new car. Now all of a sudden they see the same car everywhere and they never saw it before. How did all these people go buy this new car, the same one that I have? It's because your brain got activated to notice it, but it was always there. And whatever you focus on, you tend to find. So he's really taking that and manipulating that into a false religion and acting as the Messiah figure delivering this, and the only way to continue to get information is to listen to him talk in circles for hours at a time. That was his greatest gift. The man could talk for 4 hours about absolutely nothing. Words after words after words, and never ever actually make a point. It's incredible. And then he would get people to pay him for that, which is insane.
Well, I think one of the most important things, especially with people like that, is understanding how manipulative stories can be. Because what a lot of them do is they're tying these concepts to a story, and it's a story it seems incredible, but I mean, oftentimes that story is linked to just their unique circumstances.
Yeah.
And that ends up being the anchoring point. And people, I mean, stories are probably one of the most memorable things. Like, people remember a story. And like the one I heard about Joel Osteen was with him talking about, like, one of his examples in his books was how he's very similar about the law of attraction. I don't think he uses that specific language, but just kind of putting that energy out there, and how, one day he wanted to get a great parking spot.
Yeah.
And he pulls up and he got the first spot. And, like, that's his example about how powerful we are. The fact that we can project that we want a great parking spot today, and he's pulling out, one day out of his entire life to use that as an example to drive home this point, which is huge. I mean,
yeah.
And
people buy into it, because what happens is you get these speakers, they're charismatic, and they're persuasive. And some people would even say they have the tongue of the devil, because the fruit of what they're teaching is really just money to them. And that's really what it is. And they always have a give back. And it's like, oh, they're very generous. They give to this, they give to that. And it's like, well, if you ever took their total wealth and their total income and measured against what they give away, very often you can't find that info. And if you do, you'll find that they're not very generous. They just announce they're giving all the time. Right? So that's kind of a fruit thing, if you will. But even some people that are wealthy do give. And even some people that are very, very manipulative and persuasive and charismatic, they do give. So you can find that too. But I think what it comes down to is that hypnotism. When they're talking, they're able to freeze your brain. They use different techniques and different strategies. Neurolinguistic programming NLP is one of the things that a lot of those speakers study and use in order to influence you. There's a whole study and an art to it. And they are intentionally, the way I know it is I've been to those things. I've been to those trainings. I've been to a lot of these speakers, and some of them even teach NLP, and they have followers that teach NLP, and it's this whole world of influencing people, hypnotizing their brains, and getting them to do basically what you want them to do. And, if you really boil it all down, they have their own religion. It's a new age personal development religion, and they even have a Bible. It's Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich is their Bible. But I don't get out of that book what they get out of it, because I've read the book. The book is extremely confusing. It's very poorly written, and it's built on a false premise, because it's never been confirmed with any of the people that he actually interviewed them. It may be a book of fiction.
Yeah, I remember. I sent that to you, like, I don't know, maybe about a year ago. I read a Forbes article, and I think it came from that guy, James Janai. He does those great... You sent me some stuff on him. He takes a lot of these, just common beliefs about, like, personal development, and he exploited, Napoleon Hill. And you can read the Forbes article where people went back to validate all the key points, like him interviewing Andrew Carnegie, and people that work for him says we have no recollection, no documentation that Napoleon Hill ever interviewed Andrew Carnegie.
Right.
And it's crazy, because that's one of the most popular, well-known self-help books promoted by Bob Proctor.
It's the Bible. It's the New Age Personal Development Bible. And there's people evangelizing it all over the place, everywhere. And what's interesting, what makes it so effective, and if we go back to know your enemy, and we think about the enemy and how he works, he uses half truths, and that's what happens. So if you ever have a conversation with somebody, they'll say, "Well, I learned this from that, and it's true." And it's like, okay, so does that declare the entire book true, and everybody that reads it and follows it and everything they teach to be true, because there's a truth in the book?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about the truths in the book. I'm talking about the deceptions and the concepts and the people that follow that book and accredit all their success to that book. And it's interesting, if you ever actually measure the people with success from that book, as they say, everybody, all great successes come from that. I've met tens of thousands of people that bought the book, read the book, studied from people that swear the book has brought them all their wealth, that have no wealth whatsoever. Zero, after decades of time. And it's like, are we going to, so you're announcing the results, but are we actually going to measure the results? Mm-hmm. Or are we just going to cherry pick one? And that's really the biggest problem our country's facing right now too, is that people will take one example of a situation and build an entire argument on it and ignore all the other actual results.
I want to make a point about that.
Please do.
And shift a little bit into the music space.
Okay.
Because one thing that I notice, especially people who are religious, is they will put aside the root of a message from music, right? Secular music. And I've listened to secular music most of my life. Growing up, even going to a Christian school, listened to a lot of rap, Lil Wayne, hip hop, R&B, all of that. And it wasn't until recently, right, over the past year or two, I've gotten more into shifting into listening to more Christian hip hop artists, and it's made me more sensitive to what I've been listening to over the years, and just becoming like numb to the core message. And you got a lot of these artists, mainstream artists, that are putting out garbage music. And it's so funny because my dad's been saying this to me for years. As a kid, he was like, "Why are you listening to that?" He would get so upset at me. We'd be at a basketball game and you're hearing like this music, and like, being in high school, I'm like, wasn't thinking anything of it, but it was garbage, the stuff that they're talking about. But the backdrop is, but they give so much back to the people. Look what they've done to their community.
Right.
And that's one of the main arguments is, let's put aside what the core message is and look at what they're doing in these communities. It's a big issue.
So it's interesting. Similar to what you're saying, we just got a new vehicle, and I get in the car, and my wife's got this Sirius XM satellite thing attached to the car, and it's got this big screen on it, and you hit a button, and I'm like, oh, there's this channel. It's the 9th channel. It says the 90s on 9. I'm like, oh, cool, 90s music. So I hit the button, and my truck doesn't have that. It's just a regular radio. Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing all these songs from the 90s, from when I went to high school and right after high school. And I'm like, yes, this music, yes. And it's like, because you heard them thousands of times in your head, and they're so familiar. And music connects to a different part of your brain than anything else does. And it's like a straight line through this part of your brain to your emotions. And it makes you feel a certain way. There's something that God has designed about music inside of us that is made to connect with our emotions. And that is made by God to be good for worship. However, the enemy has designed it differently. And, there's a loosely tied verse in the scripture that implies something to the effect of Satan being the music director in heaven before he got thrown out. Some people have drawn some vast conclusions from that. But nonetheless, we know that he's present in certain music because some of it is just displayed that way. Yeah. And it's obvious from the words. But anyway, as I'm driving and listening to this music, I'm going, holy crap. I used to listen to this? Because now I'm listening to the lyrics, where when I was younger, I didn't listen to the lyrics. They were just subliminally being put in my head. Yeah. But now I'm listening to the lyrics going, what did they just say? I can't believe I heard this song like 1,000 times intentionally when I was younger. And I can't believe the garbage I was put in my head. And like you, I've become my father. Because now we're old dudes, right?
Yeah.
Or getting there. And, it's interesting, and you talk about like these give backs, like, oh, well, he pours back into the ghetto with his rap music and this, that, and the other. And, the Bible's very clear that when you give, you're to do it in secret. You're not to announce it. And if you do, like, that was your reward. There is no reward with God.
Right.
And it's become a trend now
That's a good point.
for not only artists, but businesses, these socially responsible businesses, to put on every piece of marketing, every piece of advertising, every single building, and display what their give back is. Here's what we do. And the reason they do that is because they run studies on it. People like to give their money to companies that have a give back. But they don't know that most companies have a give back. So they actually give their money to companies that display their give back. So people are rewarding companies that display their give back. But the Bible opposes that. The Bible says not to talk about it, to do it in secret, to do your giving in secret. And that's a big thing for Christian business owners, is like, there's always this pull where your business will do better if you let people know all of your give back. But that goes directly against what the Bible tells you to do. So it's interesting when I see Christian businesses that display their give back, because the book itself says not to do it. And it's not some vague thing that's up for debate. It's
very clear.
super clear in multiple places, and there's nothing that opposes it that says to announce it in any capacity whatsoever, from my opinion, from what I've read. So it's very interesting to kind of see that. So really what that is deception. It's like, look at me. I'm doing good things.
Pride.
So you should feel comfortable giving me your money or listening to my music or allowing me to talk about prostitution in my songs. And that's just the enemy twisting up God's truth, which is the first way the enemy has attacked from the garden in the beginning. God gives us Act 1, Scene 1. Here's what God says. The enemy comes to the human and says, that's not really what he meant. This is what he meant. Let me twist that up. So the word of God being twisted is how the enemy gets us off track. That's exactly the base one, plan one, protocol, full back up the middle, simple basic play. It's always going to happen because it's so effective over and over and over again. And people just need to learn and realize that's how the enemy operates and works, is by taking God's word and twisting it. And then once you believe it to be God's word, just like any other false religion, you now have a Christianity that's false because you believe false things about God's word because you don't actually know what it says. But people take little snippets and then they apply it and they say, here's this little snippet, like a Joel Osteen. Here's just an obvious, easy target, but here's this little snippet and here's what it means. And it's like, it actually has nothing to do with what you just said it means, because it's totally out of context. So taking God's word out of context is extremely dangerous because it forms your beliefs. And then you believe, similar to yoga, you believe that that is truth with all of your being. But if you go down the road and you keep moving with that belief, it's eventually going to hurt you and drift you away from God or take you to a bad spot.
Bath or Rick?
Sure. Caffeine and I had a rocky relationship, to say the least.
What happened?
What happened? I think I'm just an addict. I think, as being somebody who gets obsessed with things, and for me, energy is a huge, huge thing. So, if you drink caffeine and you smack that adrenal gland, then you're going to get this energy, but then it falls off. So you want to smack it again, or you want to smack it harder the next day because you're not getting that peak. And I feel like I'm a heroin addict trying to chase that first caffeine high all the time. So it's always progressive and it keeps adding. And before you know it, you're drinking a full pot and then you're stopping at Wawa to grab another one. And it's like, I think I have a problem here.
And you drink it black, right?
I don't drink it black. I've been using ice because I don't like it too hot, and I use unsweetened coconut milk. And at times I use MCT oil, but I don't think my belly loves it all the time.
Yeah.
I think coconut oil, while it's a good solution for cooking and things of that nature, I think we're not necessarily meant to have it every single day.
Coffee, coconut oil, all of it?
Well, the coconut oil for
Okay.
sure. I think coffee's pretty safe. You know, there's different people. Everybody's body's so different.
Yeah.
You know, some people I know, a few friends that come over. You know, we have parties and stuff, and they'll drink 2, 3 big cups of coffee at 10 o'clock at night and go home, go to bed.
That's how my dad is.
Yeah,
crazy.
everybody has a different response to caffeine.
Yeah.
You know, for me, like if I have too much, I'll jitter. If I don't
Yeah.
have enough, I'll fall asleep. And if I have just the right amount, I'll feel okay. But then, you know, I've just figured, how about we get rid of all that, and I don't fall asleep, and I'm not jittering, and I don't have to like go and get my fix. So I decided to just come off of caffeine altogether, which is not an easy thing to do because you got to fall off that cliff for a few weeks before you can kind of restore. But I also done some testing, and my adrenal glands were shot. So for years I've had, you know, energy and fatigue issues, and through chasing all different techniques of testing, I finally was doing some hormone testing, and there was this specific cortisol test that I did, which was a spit test. And that revealed some major issues with my adrenals, which I knew through some energy testing that there was adrenal issues, but I didn't fully buy into that, nor was there really a good way to solve it. I mean, I took adrenal support for years, but now I'm at the point where I'm trying to completely and totally rebuild and restore my adrenal glands, because that's the, you know, kind of kryptonite on my body is my adrenals.
And what are the adrenal glands for?
So the adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys. They're this little tiny, like triangular gland, and they do a couple things, but they mainly is for excreting adrenaline. And adrenaline is made, you know, it's there for when you need it for like extreme situations. You know, you've heard about people lifting cars because somebody's trapped under it, and this crazy, like, amazing strength. The adrenaline used in a healthy way is there to help you. But in today's culture and all the crazy nonsense we see all the time, hormones are under attack. You know, if you smack it too hard with caffeine for too long and too much of it, you can really tax your adrenals. But also just constantly seeing all these sensational things all the time, I don't think our bodies were originally made for video content, especially video content that is, you know, exciting and, you know, a certain way on the mind, because the mind reacts a certain way, and then the body just can't keep up. It just wasn't designed for the way that it's typically used today. And the sensory overload that comes in can really create major cortisol issues, major issues, and other hormones that, you know, you get super problems inside the body. And, you know, it's like TikTok brain.
Yeah.
Right. You know, it's a heavily talked about thing, but it's a real deal. You know, kids, today's younger generation, they can't enjoy life because their brains are constantly entertained on video screens. You know, and a few examples, like even my children, they grew up with Dude Perfect. And Dude Perfect will shoot a ball from a mile away, you know, 7,000 times on video until they make one. And then when they make that one, they celebrate like crazy. But all my kids see is the one being made. And then it's let's go to the next thing I'm doing where one's being made. So all they see is shots being made and people freaking out and celebrating nonstop. And then they go to YouTube and it's the same thing. Here's this dunk to that dunk. It's a highlight reel. Everything's a highlight reel. And regular life is boring to them. Reading a book is boring. Sitting around having a conversation is boring. Everything's boring because their brain has been accelerated at this certain speed, and their minds can't necessarily handle that. And it's a different challenge for this younger generation coming up. It's just the culture. It's what it is. And you try to shield your kids for it, but then you become the enemy, right? It's like you become the old guy that doesn't understand. It's like, am I becoming my father, right? And in a lot of ways, you want to become your father because we got good fathers, right?
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, too, you also have that kid inside of you that wants to understand that their world's different. And their world's always going to be this way and progressing. So you want to teach them and educate them, help them make their own decisions, but you still want to be a parent and protect them. So it's a tough line to walk, because if you just take everything away or take anything away, really, then they just don't like you. And they can downright hate you and think that you just don't understand them. But in actuality, They don't understand the subject. But as all kids are, especially teenagers, they're convinced they do. And that's the irony in the circle of life, is we get to go back and raise children the same way we were raised and have the same arguments and the same fights, and now we're in the other perspective, and now we understand why we were always told as children and we have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, teenagers probably not going to watch a documentary on social media and the truth behind all that. It's yeah, it's crazy, seeing a lot of kids being like tied and glued to the video screens, and it I think about that one documentary on Netflix. You ever saw that? It was The Social Dilemma.
Yes.
That was terrifying.
Yeah.
And that led me to get rid of all the social media off my phone and put these blockers on my laptop when I go on like LinkedIn for work or even Facebook. I don't see any news feed but it's crazy how the originators of a lot of these big social media platforms talk about how the original intent they've gotten so far off that to the point where they're not even allowing their own kids to use it.
Yeah, and we're back to the they.
Yeah.
Well, they do this and they do that, and they design it to be addictive, and they design it so kids can't stop. Well, who's they? It's back to the spiritual, right? Because I don't believe that somebody that originally creates a social media platform has this intention of like doing what it's doing now. How could you ever design that from the beginning? You have no idea. It gets a mind of its own, and it grows with influences. And it's one of the downfalls of capitalism. They capitalize the platforms through certain marketing, advertising, and algorithms, and then it's capturing eyeballs and attention, which allows them to sell more advertising to be more profitable. So in order to continue to profit, they have to capture more eyeballs, so they're going to use what captures eyeballs, which is always negative stuff. Always. Even if you look at just news media in general, everything's so negative. Mm-hmm. They just know that if they don't talk about how terrible somebody else is, that people won't watch. They'll go to another channel and watch how terrible they are, right? And so it's unfortunately people are not able to regulate that part of their brain, because it's really an alertness, like, oh, problem, oh, breaking news. Like if you really look at these news channels, every night, every show is breaking news. Mm-hmm. And there's a sound that goes with it, and there's a flash on the screen, and it's read this, and breaking news, right? So the only answer is for people to get educated on all these things, and for mass amount of people to get educated and understand this so that they don't buy the propaganda. But the reason they buy the propaganda so much is because its twin brother is censorship, and the opposition is censored. And you don't see the opposing view. You don't hear it. It's hard to get it out. Because you have these channels that they have eyeballs glued to them every night, and they're putting out all their propaganda. And stuff like this conversation right now, how do we get those eyeballs? How do we get it out? How do we get the information out? And then as soon as you do, the propaganda machine is released against it. No, that guy's a conspiracy theorist. Don't listen to him. He's a quack. Put him in jail. Lock him up. Get him off the platform. Throw him off of YouTube. Censor him. Take him off of Twitter. Facebook has blocked him. I've been blocked on Facebook a bazillion times just for sharing articles. People's opinions, or my own opinion. And that is why this country was founded on the First Amendment. Freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Mm-hmm. We're supposed to have that, but we're living in a day when we don't, and that's why we're running into all the trouble we do.
I think we should end on that note. You got a game to get to.
Sounds good.